Hello and welcome to the FanDuel Punch-Out. I'm Big Italy 42. He is Spencer Limbach at Spencer_JL on Twitter. And we've got a huge slate of games tonight, of course, which means we have a lot of starting pitchers to think about here. Starting off at the top, I mean, it's pick your ace night, really, if you're going to be paying up. You got Clayton Kershaw against the Cubs, who we've seen get dominated by Madison Bumgarner, Chris Sale recently. So now, unfortunately for them, they get another one of the best lefties in all of baseball. So obviously you love him in this spot. You don't love his price tag at $13,000, but minus 220 favorite, 6.5 run total. Right behind him you got Max Scherzer, minus 260 favorite, and the 7 run total against the terrible Miami offense. But he's $1,500 cheaper. So what do you do here? If you're paying up for one of these two guys, do you just go with Scherzer and try to get an extra bat, or do you pay up for Kershaw and see what you can do?
You know, I think it's safer to go with Scherzer because there's some guys you want to work in. I guess safer may not be the best word, but, just more optimal to assemble your lineup that way because they do have similar upside. Miami, that might even be a better matchup for Scherzer. Just looking at it across the board, I know the Cubs strike out, especially against good pitchers, as you mentioned, but for 1,500 less, I think I might rather go with Scherzer or even say Matt Harvey in the similar range there with kind of that 15, 17, 19-point upside.
Yeah, I don't blame you there. I mean, there's a lot of options up top. One guy I'm a little bit hesitant on is Francisco Liriano. He's been pretty inconsistent recently after being really good earlier in the season. Walking a ton of batters again. Looks like 3 or more in all but 3 of his last 10 starts. So hasn't been pitching particularly deep into games, and it is a Colorado team that struggles with left-handed pitching, and they are on the road. But I feel like he's one of those guys people are just going to slot in as that safe option, and I know he's a huge favorite. I believe he's minus 250 right now. Minus 250, 7-run total. So what's your take on Liriano? Because I'm a little bit hesitant here.
I really didn't have him on my list to begin with. I mean, I don't, I wouldn't go against him, really. I mean, Colorado doesn't hit lefties very well to begin with, especially on the road in Pittsburgh. But I think for a similar price, I might go with Tanaka. At Atlanta, just a very weak Atlanta lineup. He gets a good park shift there, compared to Yankee Stadium. And, really that's where Tanaka's been having his problems, has been at home this season. So facing a watered-down lineup on the road, I think Tanaka is a pretty decent play there at 9.2, and I think I might rather go with him than Liriano.
Yeah, I like that call. And then I think as a GPP play right around there, same exact price actually, Danny Salazar against the Angels. I mean, we've seen the Angels just be absolutely terrible recently. We saw the new version of Justin Verlander almost no-hit him the other day. We know Salazar's got big-time strikeout upside as well, so not a guy I necessarily am a believer in cash games tonight with all these other great options, but definitely a guy I'll be playing a lot in GPPs.
Yep.
And then Ian Kennedy, we were talking about him for the show. He's $8,300. He's been really good recently. At Colorado, had a great start, 6 2/3, 8 Ks, just 1 earned run. 0 earned runs against St. Louis with 10 Ks over 6 innings. Gave up 1 earned run against the Reds time before that. So this guy's been pitching well. And due to the fact that Philly has been hitting the ball very well, I feel like on this huge slate he's going to have really low ownership. So I think he's an interesting tournament play tonight as a guy that's been pitching well. And, he's been kind of slowing down those struggles, I guess you could say, because he was giving up a ton of home runs earlier in the season, but doing a lot better at it now. I mean, you still worry about his struggles with lefties overall, with some good lefties in that lineup. But, I mean, by good lefties, we mean okay lefties, because there's still no one outside of maybe Ryan Howard that really stands out there.
Yeah, and then another guy in that range that you mentioned earlier before the show is Iglesias of Cincinnati. He's 8K there on FanDuel. He's just been pretty good as of late. His last 4 games, he has 6 strikeouts, 8 strikeouts, 13 last time against Arizona. He only had 3 against Kansas City, but as we know, the Royals don't really strike out much, so you can kind of throw that one out as a outlier, so to speak. But he's in a pretty decent spot tonight at Milwaukee. That's kind of a hitter-friendly park, but this Milwaukee team just doesn't have the same pop as they used to. You're worried about maybe Adam Lind, maybe Ryan Braun. I mean, Iglesias is much worse against lefties. So, other than Adam Lind, I don't think there are many lefties in that lineup that you're really scared of. So, strikeout upside is there. Milwaukee does like to strike out. So, I think that's a fine tournament play as well, along with Kennedy.
Yeah, and I mean, he hasn't given up many base runners recently. 3-3, 3-3, and 4 hits in his last 5 starts. So I think he's a good option. I feel like he'll be a fairly popular one, especially because that 13 strikeout game was his last start. But definitely a guy that I'll be looking at. And then I think you got one cheap option here that you liked.
Yeah, I like Nola of Philadelphia tonight against San Diego. As we said with Iglesias, this is another guy that struggles against left-handed hitters. That's mostly where his struggles lie. So, he's facing a San Diego team that really doesn't have many left-handed hitters. You have Solarte and maybe Alonso, and even those guys, you weren't really, dreading facing them. So, Nola's a guy who could present some upside. That's a pretty even split in that game for money line. I think Kennedy's a minus 120 favorite at the moment. So, I mean, it could go either way. If Nola picks up the win, and that Phillies offense has been doing better as of late, so that's, not that hard to believe. He'd be in a pretty decent position for just 6K against the San Diego team who ranks top 5 in strikeout rate and bottom 5 in hitting. So,
Yeah, I like that. And then for a really cheap price tag, and went 8 innings in his last start. So definitely a guy that with some upside. Catcher options now. If you're looking at the top, I still like Travis d'Arnaud against the lefty and Owens. Brian McCann, obviously in a good spot against a pitcher. And Williams Perez, it's terrible against lefties. Nearly a 400 WOBA allowed so far this season. So if I'm paying up, those are really the only 2 guys I'm looking at. Is there anybody else up top that you like?
Nope, I have those 2 guys too. It's d'Arnaud and McCann, really.
All right, and then as we're looking at cheaper options, we do have a couple guys that are viable here. Yan Gomes gets a lefty. Obviously at home, you don't love the ballpark scenario for him there, but he's a fine option. And then Stephen Vogt is a guy you can look at in tournaments. And anybody else you got down here in the cheap bin?
Yeah, I think John Jaso makes for a fine cash game pick on most days, facing a mediocre righty in Edison Volquez. Probably batting leadoff again. Or actually, he's been in the cleanup role lately.
Yeah,
They've been batting Sizemore leadoff. So, I mean, either way, it works out pretty well for him. Good lineup spot. Only 2.3K. You don't mind that. Solid cash game play. And I think Vogt, as you mentioned, is the tournament pivot away from that at 2.5K. A little better park factor there in Arizona. So, he's the tournament play. Jaso would be the cheap cash game play there.
Yep, completely agree with you there. First base options, of course, Miguel Cabrera and Edwin Encarnacion are going to be your top 2 options at Toronto. You got to pay a ton of money for them, so if you're going with an elite pitcher, good luck fitting one of these guys in your lineup. Probably not going to happen. I do still like Joey Votto against Taylor Youngman. $4,600 obviously gets, I guess you could call it a slight park shift to Milwaukee. Either way, still a solid park for him here. And this is a guy that hasn't actually been very bad at all. Actually been really good against lefties. 281 WOBA allowed. So I think he's a guy you consider in your tournaments. Certainly not a cash game play at that price, though.
Yeah, and then, like you said, Encarnacion, Miguel Cabrera, they obviously have to be on your board. I don't know if you can pay for them. Really depends what you're doing at pitcher there. But if you need a guy in the mid-range, there's a couple I'm looking at here. The first one that stands out would be Prince Fielder. I know he hasn't really done anything lately. I think looking at it, 1 extra base hit in the past 10 games. So that's not very promising, but you know that his true talent level, it far exceeds this 3,100 price point. So he faces Kevin Gossman tonight at home. That's kind of a middling matchup. Not great, not horrible. So you could take a chance on him considering, just purely a price play. But otherwise, Mark Teixeira there against Williams Perez, who, as you said, very generous to left-handed hitters, would be the pivot away from that for $3,200, just $100 more expensive. But consider that he is day-to-day, so we don't know if he's going to be in the lineup. The way I'm approaching it is if he's in the lineup, I might go with him. He has higher upside. But if he's not, I might just fall back on Fielder and just, hope for the best there.
Yeah, I mean, Fielder's still, I mean, he's hitting a ton of line drives. He's still been a good hitter this year. Just, a little bit of a slump, but obviously we know he's much better than that. I do like Michael Kadire at 3,100 against the lefty also. Had a couple big games there. Been getting a lot of days off, though. Looks like he's been alternating starts and not starting, so he should be back in the lineup tonight, you would assume. And Henry Owens has not been very good, so definitely a guy that you could pick on there. And then other guys you could look at, Ryan Zimmerman is another option. I don't love his price tag at 3,300. It's okay, but he gets a lefty and Conley, who just has not been very good at all. And Zimmerman has homered in 2 of his last 3 games, so I think he's a good tournament option also.
Yep. Yeah, I had him down as a tournament option as well. So,
all right, I'll throw out one more tournament option for you. Matt Harvey's only real weakness has been left-handed batters and giving up home runs to left-handed batters, 14 on the season. So David Ortiz at $4,000, single bullet type of GPP play, but guy that I think will be really low on tonight.
Yep.
All right, second base options. I know it's a lefty-lefty matchup, but I still love Jason Kipnis. He was hitting everybody before his injury, struggled a little bit, but a couple monster games back-to-back, so probably more of a tournament option because it is a lefty-lefty matchup here, but I still like him at $3,600. Aside from that, I'll probably be paying down. I'm sure that there's a guy at $3,200 that you like, but if you're looking at cheap guys, you got Chase Utley and Colton Wong, both guys cheap. Both guys going to have the platoon advantage tonight, so I don't mind either one. I guess Utley with a slightly tougher matchup than Wong does, but neither guy in really that bad of a spot. I mean, Mike Leake has had some big struggles with lefties, so Colton Wong at $2,300. I think if you're paying for a guy like Kershaw or Scherzer, one of those 2 guys makes a lot of sense tonight.
Yeah, I don't really mind that either, but back to the mid-range as we're talking about. Actually, just a full breakdown of second base here. I think Kinsler's at the top. I don't know if I'll pay for him. I think it's more of a tournament option at 4.2K, but something to note, I know we don't like to put too much stock into BVP, but it's kind of interesting to see how guys have hit R.A. Dickey in the past, just dealing with that knuckleball. So Kinsler and J.D. Martinez are 2 guys who have, better than average numbers against Dickey. So they're a couple guys to consider from that matchup. Detroit's expected to put up some runs tonight, so if you want to get exposure, those are 2 guys to look at. Otherwise, I kind of like Anthony Rendon in a righty-lefty matchup. He's heating up lately. A couple home runs in the past 5 games, 3 multi-hit games in the past 5. Righty-lefty matchup against Conley tonight. I think he's probably my cash game preference, even over Brian Dozier, but we should mention Brian Dozier against the lefty. Granted, Kazmir is more of a ground ball lefty. I think Dozier might be more of a tournament play, borderline cash game option, but if that $300 between Dozier and Rendon is the difference in make or breaking the lineup that you like, I just obviously go with Brian Dozier and hope he gives you some upside.
Yeah, I like that definitely. And then another guy who's been hitting pretty well, stealing the occasional base as well, Cesar Hernandez. If you're not playing Ian Kennedy, he has had some struggles with lefties, so Cesar Hernandez, of course, being that switch hitter, should be batting first or second, you would assume, tonight. Not a bad price for him. Third base options, of course, you love Josh Donaldson against a lefty and a bad lefty and an ex-teammate. Not that he cares about that. He wasn't there for long. But $6,000 for him. Of course, he's your top option, as he always is, but he's priced like it more so than any other player is. So, I mean, the difference between he and the next third base option is the same as Kershaw to Scherzer. So just keep that in mind. He's the Clayton Kershaw of third base. But Miguel Sano, you mentioned Kazmir. He's a good pitcher, a good ground ball pitcher, but Miguel Sano, I think, still a good tournament option if you're going with a cheap pitcher at $4,500. But for me, I'll probably be trying to save some money. One of the hottest hitters in all of baseball right now, Mike Moustakas at $3,200. Gets Erasmo Ramirez. I mean, this guy's absolutely destroying the ball right now. So I think if I'm going mid-range, I'm just going to go ahead and slot in Moustakas. He was batting cleanup the other day. I mean, you got to like that he's getting a bump back up in the order. Nice RBI spot. And, I mean, he's hitting a ton of extra base hits right now.
Yeah, I like him as well. You have to figure he's going to be a popular play because a lot of people like taking comfort in the game logs. Not that that's a bad strategy, but it's just a good indicator that, I mean, he will have a relatively high ownership percentage tonight. So a tournament pivot away from him would be Danny Valencia, I think. He's 3.3K. He's just been hitting everyone lately, right-handers, left-handers. And he has a pretty decent lineup spot there for Oakland. He gets a park upgrade at Chase Field tonight, and Chase Anderson of Arizona A lot more generous to righties than lefties. 343 WOBA against righties over the past 3 years. So putting all that together, I think Valencia makes for a nice lower-owned tournament swerve off of Mike Moustakas.
Yeah, I like that. And then David Wright.
Yep.
We know he crushes lefties throughout his career. Another one of those guys may fly a little bit under the radar. I know the Mets have been popular recently, but 3,600 for him. I think he's a good tournament option. And then looking down on the bargain bin for your cheap guys, you've got Aramis Ramirez, a guy who is in the middle of an offense that's producing. He hasn't been doing a lot, but he's been consistently doing something, which makes him a decent cash game play at 2,800 if you ask me. And then, of course, you can consider another guy for cheap that hits lefties well. Obviously, only a tournament option, but Trevor Plouffe at $2,800. I'll consider him as a single bullet there.
Yep.
All right, shortstop options. Troy Tulowitzki, $3,800. I wish it was $3,800 against the lefty Boyd. I mean, if he was $2,800, you'd imagine he'd be about 90% owned, even on this big slate. But
it would just be a wash, basically, for everyone.
Yeah, I mean, you'd almost be better served just not playing him just because everyone would be on him. But either way, we won't ever see him at that price. Carlos Correa, against the contact pitcher, you got to like that. He makes tons of hard contact, but, of course, he also is very expensive. A guy I'm really looking at, though, Romer Flores has been killing left-handed pitching. $3,200 tonight. Got the day off yesterday, so he should be nice and well-rested for Mr. Owens tonight. And I think he's probably, outside of Tulo, my favorite play up near the top because, I mean, the guy's been mashing, and the Mets are scoring a ton of runs right now.
Yeah, if you're looking at value, I mean, I also like Flores. I should mention that. But if you want value, maybe to fit Kershaw and Scherzer, one of those guys, I think it's Alcides Escobar, as usual, a shortstop for 2,400. More due to the fact that I don't see anyone else than the fact that I actually like Alcides Escobar. Yep. I mean, I guess you could look to lineup spots as we get the batting orders later in the day, see if anyone just kind of sneaks up there in a good spot, decent matchup. But I think, Alcides Escobar is going to be one of your better value bets at shortstop. But otherwise, I mentioned that I like Flores. Another guy that I like is Ian Desmond. Righty-lefty matchup, could get some upside there against Conley at home. Been hitting the ball decently as of late, so he's one of those guys who caters more on the boomer bust side for tournaments, so just keep that in mind. But yeah, I think he ranks right up there, alongside Flores as well.
True. And when you were talking about Alcides Escobar, all I could think about is how he's like the ex-girlfriend. Nobody really likes her, but she's always kind of around. So you just
and you don't really hate him.
Yeah,
you're just like you don't hate him enough to just say get away, whatever.
Yeah,
but yeah,
like
they just hang out there.
Hang out.
Yeah.
I'll throw out one more cheap guy that I do like, Marwin Gonzalez against Kyle Gibson, 2,400. Especially if he gets a nice lineup spot, he's got some nice upside at that price.
Wait! You know what I thought you were gonna say when you said Alcides Escobar reminds me of
Eduardo Escobar,
the greatest Escobar in baseball right now. Probably the greatest player with the initials EE right now. No,
I was sure you wouldn't say
Edwin Encarnacion.
Unbelievable. Well, anyway, if you want to insult Spencer for his sacrilege there, Edwin Encarnacion, obviously. Although I will say this, he can't be a worse defender than Edwin Encarnacion. I'll tell you that.
No, that's why Encarnacion is only a DH right now.
Yeah, he'll never get the nickname E5, that's for sure. Speaking of E5, his teammate, Jose Bautista, of course you got to like him at $5,300 against the lefty at home. I mean, he's doing it in ways with not even hitting home runs recently. Last game, 2 walks and a stolen base. The game before that, walked 4 times. So, I mean, he's been really, really productive up top there. Got to like him, but it's going to be really hard for me if I'm paying up not to pay for Nelson Cruz against John Danks. Love him or hate him. You probably should hate him. He seems like a real jerk, but Nelson Cruz at 5K against Danks is the best spot of the night.
That's a story for another day. John Danks is a jerk. It seems like we have a lot of those stories for another day.
Yeah.
We should probably just make a podcast with stories from another day.
We should.
So, yeah. I mean, if you want to see it happen, you should put that in the comment section or tweet at us and be like, hey, let's get this going.
That would be a hell of a podcast. I'm sure we
stories for another day. We can talk Lonnie Chisenhall, Eduardo Escobar, John Danks throwing things more than just a baseball. All sorts of good stuff like that. So yeah, let us know if you want to see that happen. We can probably make it work.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
No, go ahead. That was it.
Okay. I didn't know if you wanted to add something in there.
Not yet.
Okay. Yeah, another guy I like in the outfield, Chris Colabello. Obviously, with that Toronto stack, they're the highest projected scoring team tonight against lefty at home. Yeah, Colabello probably bat fifth, great RBI spot behind all those guys, Bautista, Encarnacion, Tulowitzki, Donaldson. 3.4K. I don't mind. That's probably a little higher than I like, but I really don't mind it considering 2 homers in the past two games, 3 hits over the past 2 games, and a great matchup, great RBI spot, great team total. I don't mind spending an extra, say, $300 than we're more accustomed to. So I think Colabello is an easy cash game play there. Otherwise, kind of looking around, Josh Reddick, 2.6K. That's a decent value option. He still has some upside, even though he's been disappointing the second half of the season. Gets a nice park upgrade in Arizona, so I think he's one of the better, more on the bargain side of things. He's not close to minimum salary, but still someone you want to look at for value. Otherwise, I said it before, JD Martinez, pretty decent numbers against R.A. Dickey. I think that's a tournament option at 3.9K. Park upgrade as well in Toronto there. And then I have one more tournament guy that I want to throw out there that I think is going to have a very low ownership percentage, and it's Mark Canha is that how you say it? Of Oakland.
I think it's Kana. That's what Josh told me. So blame Josh if that's not right.
Well, I that sounds more right than what I said. I don't even know what I said. But yeah, you know what I'm talking about. He's 3K on FanDuel. And as I said before, Chase Anderson, 343 WOBA against righties. Big park shift there in Arizona. And, Kanha.
Yep.
Is that it?
Yep.
Okay. He's been one of the hottest hitters over the past week. Granted, the past 2 games, he's combined 0 for 9. So I think that's going to have a lot of people saying, okay, hot streak's over. We're done with him. We're not even going to look at him. When really, he's getting a better matchup than the ones over the past week and a better park upgrade. So I think you can give him a look for a single tournament bullet right there. Otherwise, cash game swerve from there. Carlos Gomez starting to turn things back around finally. In Minnesota there should be plenty of runs put on the board, and he's only 3K, so that's a nice discount.
Yeah, I like that too. And then any of these lefties for the Yankees, of course, we already mentioned Perez and his struggles against lefties. We got day-to-day for Jacoby Ellsbury, sat out Wednesday. Didn't play yesterday, obviously, so we'll see if he's hit back in the lineup. I think Beltran kind of a little overpriced at $3,400, but nice tournament play. But you can get Brett Gardner for only $3K, so I think he's a great option there also. And then looking at cheap guys, one guy that always seems to fly under the radar, and he's not a great matchup, but especially when he bats up top, he's got a little bit of power. He's got some speed. Nori Aoki at 2,600 I think is an okay option against Michael Wacha there. And then other cheap guys to consider, Andre Ethier, $2,300, gets the platoon advantage at home against Jason Hamill, who's not been very good recently. And then I definitely got to mention Kevin Kiermaier, 2,600. He's going to be a tournament option because he's probably going to bat eighth because they
hit him.
They need production in the 8-hole apparently because that's what he gives. And he's been really good recently, so I like that as a cheap call also.
Yeah, and if you're keeping a list of stories for another day, maybe you have a piece of paper there by your computer or something, go ahead and write down my pronunciation skills because I think that's a story for another day that we need to touch on.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. And I'm sure there's more people than just you we could get on that part.
Okay.
We have to get some
we can
guests.
bring in guests and start asking them about their pronunciation skills and just go down the list segment to segment like that.
Yeah, and especially once we get to NBA season, because there's definitely some fun ones for that too.
Hey, I'm a little better in NBA just because I actually hear the names more because I watch more NBA than I do MLB. It's tough to track MLB more than just the box scores and the stats and everything, but I actually hear the names there, so I'm a little better and I know them rather than just reading them and writing them.
And less names too. There aren't quite as many players.
Yeah, that's right.
Especially once we get to September now, there's going to be about 1,000 new names. So we better get to work on learning how to pronounce those. I can't even say pronounce now, so maybe we'll have to work on that.
It's going to be downhill.
Oh,
it might be pretty brutal moving forward.
It's nothing but down from here. So, all right, thanks for hanging out with us. Find us on Twitter at DF Cafe. Subscribe to our YouTube channel. Check out all of our great content at dailyfantasycafe.com.